Hey, welcome back to learning to make a 2D platformer in Godot. Alright, so in this video, as promised, we're going to work on making water. So it'll look something like this. You'll be able to swim around in the water, jump out of the water, and you get little effects when you go in and out of the water. And so yeah, we're also going to do a little bit of cleanup and change the background color and things like that. So I hope you enjoy. Let's get started. Okay, so from where we left off, we need to add some water. Now we did originally add a water tile, so let's draw some of that in here. We'll just make a little pool off to the side. Actually, so one thing I did do between videos is I created these kind of base nodes, or grouping nodes, and then I put all these kind of stray game objects inside of those. That way we can organize things a little bit and we don't have such a cluttered scene view over here when we don't need to. So let's see. So what I want to do is I'm editing my thing. Let's actually make this pool be a little closer to the player. So let's grab this one and move it over here on this side, which will probably look a little better anyways. And then let's go back to our water and move that water a little closer to the player so that you can hop in the water a little quicker. Alright, so we've edited the water. Now if we run into the water now, what will happen, and the one thing I did do is I rearranged the order here so that the tile map renders on top of the player. So what will happen is my player will disappear into the water, and we don't want that. We want to be able to see the player, but we'd like it to affect the player. So what I'm going to do is we're going to pop open our tileset template, and we're going to go to our water sprite here, or tile, and down here under visibility, let's take the modulate here, and let's pull the alpha value down. Now you can see I can see the gray behind there. So you got to pick a good value, probably about 2/3 of the way there, which is like 160 or so. Should be good. So we save this, and of course we still have to convert and go back to our tile set and overwrite our default tile set. Alright, so now that that's done, now you can see I can see through my tile, and if I play this and then run into the water, I should still be able to see my character, but he's got kind of a bluish tint to him because that water affects him. Now this gray looks pretty bad with this background, and later we'll add an image in the background that'll scroll with us called a parallax layer. But for right now, let's just pick a solid blue color. So to change the background color in Godot, it's real easy. What you do is you go up here to Project Settings, and then under Environment, under Rendering Environment, there's this default clear color. And so what I did is I looked at old pictures of Mario game, and they actually had a much bluer image than I expected. It was kind of somewhere in there, and they kind of ranged. It was interesting. They changed over the different versions of Mario, but let's just say it was roughly like this, or actually maybe a little darker. Let's try that. Let's go a little bit darker. So we'll pull that over just a little bit. And let's see how this looks. So yeah, that makes my water look a lot more believable. But of course right now, we behave exactly like we do up on land when we're in the water. What we'd really like to happen is for the player to behave differently when he's in the water. So let's look at how to do that. So there may be a way, well, Godot treats the tile map as a single object, and so I don't think you can use it for an area, so to like detect that a player's in a specific area, and we're using it as a static object currently. So down here under collision, it's currently a static object, and we've got it on this layer and stuff. So we aren't able to make this area walkable, but also trigger an action when you enter it on just the tile map. So what you have to do is you need to add a new area, 2D, and we're going to of course need a collision shape under that, and that needs of course a shape. So we'll just use a rectangle, and let's pull this. We'll go ahead and mark this so it won't grab the insides. and we'll go ahead and pull this down. And what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to go ahead and adjust this to match this size. Now if you had a lot of water, this might be kind of a pain to make a bunch of these and make sure they match. Nope, didn't want to do that. Yeah, I did. And make sure they all match exactly up. So we may look at another method of doing this later. I'd kind of like to add like an ice effect, so when your player runs along the surface of ice, he maybe changes his behavior. But for right now, I think this is a really good method to look at because it also is useful for other types of things we're going to look at. So like and we've already looked at it a little bit with the bushes and the doors and the flags and stuff like that. We've already looked at this, so I think this is a really good method of approaching this right now. So the next thing we need to do is we're going to label this water so that we know that's the water, and we're also going to add a script to that, and we'll just let's actually, before we do that, let's convert this into a its own scene. So we'll save it here under our objects. We'll call it water area. And now when I open this up and I try and add my script, it's going to put the script in the right place. So I don't need any of this. And what we're going to do is we're going to attach events to when an object enters the area or not. So another thing I want to do is let's zero out my transform right there. So what we're going to do is we've zeroed out that transform, and we're going to add those events. So to do that, I just go to Node, and I go to my Area 2D, and I want to look at the body entered and body exited. And these are the two I'm going to tie up to. So I'm going to attach those to that script I just made, and I'm going to do it here. And so now I've got triggers or signals for both body entered and body exited. So what I'd like to do is I'm going to do this I'm sure there's another way to do it, but what I'd like to do is I'd like to tell the player that he's in water when he enters water and that he's exited water when it exits. And this was nice because this will work for any objects that enter the water. So I can, as many objects as I'd like that are able to enter water, I can program them to behave when they hit the water and not. So what we're going to do to make that happen is right here. So this body right here, in our case, is going to be the player. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the fact that GDScript is a dynamic language, which means I can call functions on an object and not necessarily know that they're there. So in this case, body is just a all I know that is that it's a 2D physics body, but I don't know that it's a player. So what I can do is I can say body dot entered water. Now in this case it'll throw an error because that function doesn't actually exist. And even more so, it's dangerous because some other object may enter that water and trigger this function, and they may not have that function, and so it would also cause an error. So what we want to do to protect from this is we're going to use a function in Godot called hasMethod right here, and it's on object, which is all objects inherit from this, all classes inherit from this. So everything's going to have this. So that's hasMethod. So what I can say is if body.hasMethod and then go entered water, and my casing needs to be correct, then I'm allowed to call this function. Otherwise, just don't do anything. So I'm going to do the same thing here. And now I know that if these are triggered by any object and they don't have these functions implemented, then nothing bad will happen. It'll just ignore it. So that's actually all I need to do here on my water area. So I'm coming back to my player, and I don't have my script up for that. So let's go to my player, and let's look at his script. And here I need to implement those two methods. So that's easy to do. We know how to make functions, so we go function entered water, and and we need another one for function exited water. And we need to do something here because we'll get an error about, because we don't have any contents in these functions. So what I'd like to do, let's add a couple of variables here. So the first one we're going to need is I want to track whether or not we're in the water. So I'm going to make a boolean, which is a true or false value, and I'm going to say is in water equals false, because we're going to start outside of the water. If you needed to start inside the water, we would have to adjust this. So if you like spawned into a water level, we would need to adjust this or set that when the player started. So you could make this an export, whatever. But in our case, we're just always going to start on land. So when you enter the water, we set is in water equals true. And when they exit, we're going to set that back to false. Alright? So now we know whether the player is in the water or not, because when they enter the water, we're going to trigger that and we're going to apply that value to the player, and the player will then know whether or not he's in water. But we need to make some effects on that. So the first thing let's do, let's adjust how fast he falls. So currently we add gravity, but we don't cap gravity. So let's do a cap on gravity, and I don't know, let's do 20,000 for now. So what we need to do here is set velocity y equals the minimum of velocity.y plus gravity, or max grav. Is that what I called it? No, grav max. Backwards. Alright. So I'll take either the sum of that or that, whichever one is lower. So that way this total value will never exceed gravity max. So this will keep my player from falling super fast. So if I fell off a cliff, I would just eventually continue to grow in y velocity. That's not really what we want. We kind of have a terminal velocity there. So what I'd like to do is, if I'm in water, is in water, right? I want to behave differently. So let's copy this line. And put it in an else statement. So this is when I'm not in water. So when I am in water, then let's take gravity max and divide it by 3. And we'll do the same thing here. We'll divide that. That way he moves a little slower when he hits the water. And we can make our own constants for these if we wanted to have fine-tuned control over it. But we'll just do this and see how it works. So let's give that a shot. So if I jump up in the air and I fall into the water, I see a little bit of a slowdown, but it's not quite as much as I'd like. So let's bump this number up to, say, 5, and 5 here. Let's give that another shot. Alright, I'm not seeing it. Let's make sure that I'm printing. I know that I'm entering the water, so let's print in water. Alright, let's make sure that that's triggering the way I expect it to. See there? Not getting my trigger that I expected. So let's see what's wrong here. I honestly don't know. So there's my water. And let's open that up. Collision shape. I bet I know what I did. So remember, I reset my transform. I did not reset it here. So that was one problem. And my transform is set on this one. Oops. Yeah, there we go. So let's see back in level 1 where my water is, and it's way up here. So that was my problem. I reset that and did not move this back into position. So there we go. It's back into position. Let's try it now. I may have to readjust those numbers now because I kind of overcompensated. There we go. So he still jumps fast, but he does slow down when he hits the water. So that's good. Alright, so, and those numbers are kind of acceptable, so we'll just leave them for now. So let's close that water again. We've got this guy fixed. Excellent. So let's go back into our player and look at our player script. So the next thing I want to do, let's remove this. So got the falling. Let's fix. Let's see. Let's make him be able to swim. So if well, actually, let's fix the jump. So what I can do here, actually the easiest way to fix all this is to say if is in water. Let's have an alternate movement system, right? So we'll do that there, and then else we'll do all this. So I'm going to shift all of this up. So none of this code will run when he's in water. So that means he won't slow down, he won't duck, and he won't be able to jump, and he won't be able to move left and right. So this will be kind of interesting. So if I hit water, I should yeah. Not sure what this else statement goes to. Oh, I should have shifted it over with this, I see. So that belonged with this one right here. So if it's not on the floor, then it's in the air. Alright, let's actually move this. It doesn't like to save your scene, by the way, or save your code, by the way, if your scene is running. So there we go, that's a little bit clearer what's going on. Alright, so let's try this now. So if I jump in the water, I lose all control. So he's just plowing ahead, and I can't, left and right doesn't do anything. So that's good. Let's animate him based on that. So if he's in the water, let's go in here and we'll set his animation to swimming. Now we need to add the swimming animation, right? Because we don't have that. So let's go to our player. We'll go to the player instance, and let's jump into our animated sprite, and we'll jump into the frames. And of course, well, this is from where I was playing, but that shouldn't be in there. So we'll add a new animation, rename it to swim, and let's drill into our art here and find our swim animations and drag those over. And we can speed this up a little bit if we want to. We'll check that out, see how that looks when we get in game. But that could speed up our animation, and we're just going to have him sit there and paddle along when he's in water. We don't need to worry about animating only when he's moving around or anything like that. I think it'll look fine that he's always swimming. So let's do that and see if that works. So there we see him paddling around, his little arms and legs are moving, so that's good. So now let's add his movement back. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy all three of those actually and paste them back in, and we're going to clean out stuff. So we're going to clean out, I do need to flip him, so because I do want him to move left and right. I'm going to remove his animations because I don't need those. This one's fine. I could make him slow down faster, right? Because he's slowing down at 10%, so we could slow him down at 3%, so he has more viscosity in water. And up here we want to, let's see, yeah, so we can take acceleration and actually divide it by 2, right? And we could do the same with max speed. And so what we're doing here is pretty much the same thing that we did up here with the gravity. We're just doing it here for the left and right. So now I should be able to control myself, left and right at least, in the water. Yeah, there we go. And he slows down really quick. There's very little, maybe too much stopping. So let's add a little bit of that back. And so we have the nice water control. However, spacebar no longer does anything. I don't jump anymore. So let's fix that. Now in water we don't care about we don't care about whether or not we're on the floor, right? Because in water we can kind of swim up anytime. So we're just going to grab our jump, and we're just going to paste it in here. So put a little gap so that we know that this doesn't belong to this if statement, if block. And we're just going to say if you accept, which is our jump button. We should fix that, make a custom action in the future, but for now, and jump height, we can make a new one. So in this one, I'm not just going to divide it. Let's actually make a variable. So we'll make a swim height, and let's do let's see, negative 8,000. Let's try that. I think that's the number I chose earlier. So from jump height, we'll do it swim height. And let's try that. So there I'm in the water, and if I hit space, I go up a little bit. So yeah. So now I can move around left and right. I can kind of go up and down. I sink. I can also, swim up. We could, from here, you could make a whole underwater level with, spikes or something that you had to dodge. One thing, and we kind of come out of the water nice and slow, so we have enough of a oomph to get out of the water, and that's based on that 8,000 that we selected. So I have enough oomph to get out of the water, which is great, but at the same time I'm not, jumping like this out of the water, which would be kind of unrealistic. So I think this is pretty good for our movement. I don't think we need to adjust too much right here. So let's move on to adding a little bit of juice to our water effect. So juice is like effects that make this feel better. So what I'd like to do is, I think this is the first time we've used a particle system in this game. So let's give that a shot. So let's make a little splash of water that happens when he enters and exits the water. So I'm going to create a new scene here, and I'm going to make a particle. And the reason I'm making this in its own scene is so I can instance it when I'd like to. And let's rename it before I do that. So I'm going to call it water or splash particles 2D, right? And we'll save that under objects. We could even make a SFX folder, and we'll put it in there. Alright, so got my splash particles, and all I'm going to do here, so particles are a little bit of a, I haven't figured out the science to them yet, so I mostly just fiddle around with settings until I get it to behave the way I want it to, which is probably not what you wanted to hear, but that's kind of where I'm at. So here it's emitting, but they're not falling. So let's see. We're going to scoot the time down a little bit. We don't want it to live that long. And explosiveness, let's go up in explosiveness. Let me get, so the reason I think it's not spraying is because if you look at this error, it says the material is not assigned. And what it's talking about is this process material here. And you can do a shader model, which means you can code up. Let's look at this. So if you look at the shader, it allows you to write code here. But this is a shader language, which is not GD script. And it's kind of a little bit over our heads for right now, so let's not do that. Let's go down here and we'll clear this. And let's write a new particles material. So this one's already defined, and so now you can see the effect here. So let's undo that explosiveness. It was at 0. So what happens is it just kind of sprays out, and by default the particle material here has a gravity of 98, so that's what's causing them to fall down. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back and add that explosiveness, which means they're going to kind of spray out in kind of spurts. And what we're going to do is, in code, we're going to set this one shot. So what one shot means is it'll run one time and then stop. So see there, when I toggle this emitting, it kind of fires and then stops. And that's what we want, but if I have this on now, I won't be able to see my effect, and we kind of want to see it as we work on it. So the next thing I want to do while we're out here, before we dig into this particles material, is we want to set the visibility. Let's set it just a little bit blue. Right? We'll give it just a hint of a touch of blue there, so it's not just straight white. We want to know that it's water coming out. We're going to leave it cubes. You could add, like a little, you could draw your own little splash kind of picture there and turn them into those. And the way you would set those is under this particles here. I think there's a maybe back here, material maybe. Anyways, there is a property here. Oh, textures. There's where you would set it. So that's where you would set what the picture is. But in our case, we're just going to leave it little cubes. I think that'll be fine for this. So let's drill in here, and I cheated a little bit. I did this before, and these are the settings that I saved, so I printed them off to save them. So I'm going to set the spread, and what this does, so the initial, so the spread is the angle that it comes out. And oh, one other big setting I need to change here. So this one took me a little bit to find, and it's the, oh, here it is, local chord. So what this will mean is if I attach this to the player, right, it's gonna, let's actually do that real quick. So the goal here is I'm gonna have, well, I'm actually gonna have this right here. So we're gonna add, alright, so if I want to add that here, I need to go to SFX and drag it over and drop it right there. So there you can kind of see my particles. Let's make it bigger real quick. And to do that, we can go down here to the splash particles, and we can do the scale, and let's bump that up to like 5. I get nice big particles, which when they're on the player will look a little bit better. So I'm going to scoot this down to his feet. Right? So, right. So if I play this and I run around, you see the particles follow him. Which, you know, if this is splashing it, and right now it looks a little bit not good. So let's fix that. So I don't want it to follow him. I want it to stay where the particles started. So that what I need to do is turn off this local coordinates. So all right. So let's do that. We'll turn off the local coordinates, and so the spread is that. Now the other thing I need to change is this initial velocity, I think is what I'm looking for. Yeah, so right now they have no velocity, so even though they're coming out, they're just falling straight down because they have no push to them when they come out. So now they're kind of spraying out because they've got this initial velocity. And as you notice, my spread here was at 45, so what was happening here is it was spraying out in this area right here. And by changing this to 90, it's now spraying out in this whole area here. But of course what we really want is for them to spray upwards, so what we're going to do is rotate it 90 degrees to the left. So here under transform, rotation, I'm going to go -90 degrees. So now we get what we expect, you know, like the water, you hit the water and the water sprays out kind of in this 180 degree arc in an upward direction. Alright, so I think I had one other setting in here. Let's see what it was. Nope. I looked at the gravity and we didn't need to change it once we set those local coordinates. I did set the scale, we set the initial velocity, and we set the spread. Alright, so let's just go with this. We don't want to spend too much time on this. Maybe later we'll revisit particles and dig deeper in. But I think this will be fantastic for now. So yeah, this actually looks pretty good, right? Kind of looks like a little bit of water splashing around at his feet. But we don't want to do this. What we actually want to create is we want to create this particle when the player hits the water and when they exit the water. So we need a placeholder to tell us where that'll be, right? So we need we're going to use a position 2D to determine where we're going to put it. So we're going to put it just a little bit above his, kind of in the middle of his boots. And you can put that wherever you'd like. So splash position 2D looks good. And so we need to adjust the script. So the quick way to reference a scene, right? So we looked at exports and dragging it in. Quick way here, and we'll just use the quick and dirty. So we use variable, and we're going to call it splash scene equals preload, and we're going to pick that SFX particle splash particles right there. So this will give us a reference to that splash particle scene. So the only thing we need to do here to create it on the entered water is go splash scene.instance. Right, and that'll create an instance of it. So let's stuff that in a variable. We'll call it splash. Right, we need to set the position of that. So we're going to say splash.position equals, and you know where we get that from? We get it from this splash position 2D. So we need to get node, and we'll use that splash position 2D, and we get the position from that. Right, so that I set my position, and the final thing we need to do is add this to the scene, and we're just going to add it here to the player. So we'll add child splash. Alright, and we're going to do the same exact thing when you exit the water, so that you get a little splash effect when he comes out. So let's try that. There it goes. Now, one thing I forgot is, remember we left the emitting on, or the one shot on. So let's turn that on. So let's go splash dot one shot equals true. All right, and you can find that in the in the documentation. One shot right here on the particles, and you can see is true if only one emission cycle occurs. Alright, so now when I play and I hit the water, I get a little splash when I hit, and when I come out I get another little splash. Looks great, right? And if I kind of jump along the top of the water, I get a nice little effect. Looks great. I think that is a really fantastic effect, and looks really good for the amount of effort we put in. So you can do all kinds of stuff here. You could add more particles, you could color them, you could or paint an image for them so they look like a little splash instead of just cubes. Big thing I would probably add next is a sound effect, right? So if you had a little, you know, kind of sound when you're hitting the water, I think that would add a lot. We could actually do that real quick. So why not, right? So let me jump into my game development tools here. Let's go to Audacity, which is a free sound recording program. Now I'm just going to make a sound effect with my mouth, so it's not gonna sound perfect, but you know, we'll give it a shot. So all I have to do is go up here to record and go. Alright, so I stopped it. I've got a lot of white noise here, so I can play that back. I'm not sure if you guys can hear that, but I do have a lot of white noise here. What I can do is I can select a segment, and that's going to be my white noise that I'm going to use for a filter. So I'm going to go to noise reduction, get noise profile, and then let's deselect that, make sure it's deselected, and we'll do noise reduction, and I'll leave the defaults, and let's go OK. And you see my line here went to like really smooth, and it also modifies this area. So if I play again, yeah, it really cleaned out this area, and my actual sound effect sounds a lot cleaner too. So what I really want to do is come in here and select just the sound effect, and I'm going to cut that and delete this audio track and paste it, and I get a new audio track that's just my sound effect. Right? So now I can play just this little tiny piece. So I'm going to export this, and I'm going to save it to my Godot projects, Adventure World, and I don't have a sound folder yet, so let's make one. New folder, sound, and let's call it splash.wave. I think it'll add the wave for me, and I'll just leave that empty. Right. So now I get in Godot, I get a message that it's loading importing assets. Hopefully that won't take too long. There we go. And let's come back to here, and we're going to add a sound source. So let's do audio, and I get various things. 2D, I think what this does is if the character's on the left hand side, it'll come out of your left speaker, and if it's on the right, it'll come out of the right. I think that'll be fine in this case, so let's go ahead and add that. The regular audio player will just play the sound no matter what, this one, and it'll just play it kind of in the center. And this one is for, you know, obviously 3D. So here it's asking for a stream, so let's go up to sound. we'll drag in splash, and playing is false, and autoplay is false, and I think that's okay, because what we're going to do is we're going to trigger this. So I'm going to say splash auto stream player 2D, and in a real game I would probably relabel these to just like splash sound or something like that, but I'm kind of leaving the name there so that you know what kind of node that came from. Alright, so in my script, to play a sound, all you have to do is go get node, right, because I needed a reference to that node. I'm going to get the splash thing, and you just say play, right? So I'm going to do the same thing when you exit. I may get a little bit of a may get a little noisy when you go in and out quickly, but we'll check it out. Yeah, hopefully you can hear that. But yeah, that sounds pretty good for considering it was a super quick job. Obviously, if you wanted the sound to be better, I would probably look online and see if you can find some free ones, or if you're good at making your own sound effects, that would be definitely preferable to just making a sound in your microphone. But that does give kind of the effect, and I think we've got a lot juicier feeling game going on. So alright, I think this video has been pretty long as it is. Now we need some jump sounds for sure. So maybe oh yeah, there we can feel the terminal velocity there. So when I fall like that, I kind of get a little bit more of a floaty feel than I used to. But that's good, because we don't want the player falling too fast. But yeah, so yeah, I'm not sure. I think the next level maybe we'll do a kind of like end game. But I definitely want to get to monsters soon, because I know that's kind of exciting stuff and kind of adds a level of challenge to the game. We may also do like a spike. That might be a good one. Yeah. So we might do like spikes that you have to avoid to get the player around, because we want to turn this into a full game. I'll probably start looking at what I kind of want this game to look like in the end, because up to now I've just kind of been tackling different things as we kind of come along, but we kind of need a goal at this point that we can hit. But I think this is great. This same method you can use for all sorts of stuff. So when you enter an area, so a fireball hits the player, you can affect the player by subtracting from his health. You can also affect him by adding a on fire effect. We did the same thing with the bushes, but in the bushes case we're not affecting the player, we're just affecting the bush. But in this case, we're affecting the player by changing his behavior movement, right? And another thing we could do is, since we know that he's in water, we could actually spawn little bubbles every once in a while. So that could be something neat to add, but I'll leave that to you. Alright, so one last thing I think I did in this video that I may not have shown, that I want to show real quick before we jump off, is under project settings, down here under display on window, I changed this to, well, apparently I didn't. Let's do that right quick. So let's change it to viewport and keep the aspect ratio, and then up here under rendering quality, let's turn pixel snap on. And what this will affect is when I go full screen, I noticed that when I went full screen, I changed this window perspective. I was seeing more of the screen than what I intended with my viewport, so I was seeing down below the ground. And now that I've got that, I can still see it here, so what I would want to do is extend my tile map down. But I was seeing more than I wanted to, and my ratio was getting kind of thrown off, and this looks really good. And the pixel snap helps your pixels not look kind of wonky. So anyways, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and we'll keep going with this one. Bye. One very last thing that I noticed before I release a video is that on my special effects here, my particle, we didn't look at, or we didn't clean that up. So if you watch the scene view live, let's do that real quick. Yeah, that was my video start button. So if we watch this live, and what we're going to do is open up the player so we can see the nodes under the player, and then as I jump in and out of the water, you see what's happening here is we're creating sprite nodes every time I splash in and out of the water, and these never go away, right? So if we splashed in and out of the water for, you know, a good 10-15 minutes or whatever, we may get to the point where Godot gets really slow because it's having to track all these nodes that are not actually doing anything, but they're just piling up. And I just saw a little lag spike there, which is probably related to all these nodes that I just created. So what we need to do is clean those up, and that's pretty easy to do. It's a little unfortunate that the particles don't have their own signal that they emit when they finish. That may be in the works from the Godot folks. I think I may have seen something about that, but that would be fantastic. But since it's not there, what we can do is just add our, and also since we put this in its own scene, this makes this fantastically easy. What we need is a timer, and I don't have one in here, so I'm gonna have to find a timer. And I just add that, and I'm gonna call this the kill timer, or cleanup. Makes more sense. So cleanup timer, and the wait time, all that needs to be is greater than the lifetime here. So I set my lifetime to 0.5, which I didn't talk about that, but the lifetime is how long do these particles live for. And you see when I change that to 1, they live for a lot longer and they kind of splash further. In our case, we kind of want it to be a little bit of a quick animation, so let's leave that at 0.5. But this cleanup timer, as long as it's 0.5 or greater, it will be fine. One shot, this doesn't really matter too much. We do want the auto start on, and the reason for this is yeah, let's go ahead and fire this on. Won't matter. We're going to clean up this entire, both the timer and the particle, when this timer expires, so that doesn't matter. But the auto start does need to be on, because as soon as we create the particle, we want this timer to start, and when that 1 second expires, we want to go and delete itself. So we need a script on here, and that's the unfortunate part and why it would be nice if I don't know if we could have that particles auto clean up. But anyway, so we've got a script on here, and all it's going to need is a simple function. We don't even need to write the function. What we need to do is go to the timer and node and attach to this timeout signal. Attach that up here to our splash particle script that we just created, and all it has to say is queue free. And like we saw before in one of the previous videos, queue free is a deferred function call, so it won't happen immediately. It'll happen at the end of this game cycle, or yeah, at the end of this loop of the cycle, and so it'll be nice and cleaned up, tidy. So let's see that in action real quick. So if I go in here, let's break this down again so we can see them as they pop up, and let's jump in the water. Let's create a few of them, and we'll jump out of the water, and now you see they clean themselves up. So that's fantastic. No matter how long I jumped around in here, eventually all those particles will go away, and our scene stays nice and tidy. So that's last little tip. I would have gotten raked over the coals for not doing that, so I'm glad I remembered that. So thanks for watching, and enjoy.